Sometimes things don't fall apart in a scream, but in the silence between two knocks. That evening, I stood by the window, watching through the blinds. Street lights shimmered in puddles on the blacktop, and steam rose from the passing tires like breath in winter. The blinds creaked softly, a brittle, whispering sound. The old air conditioner buzzed in the corner, dry and sluggish. And that was the moment my coldest war began. My name is Mark Davis. I'm 49. I live in Tampa, Florida, and for the past 18 years I've worked as an insurance agent for a mid-size firm near the marina. I drive a fading silver 2016 Subaru Outback and start every morning with a cinnamon Guatemalan roast from a narrow little cafe tucked between a dry cleaner and a pawn shop on 7th and Pineview. The barista always gives me the same nod, same receipt folded twice. I like my coffee sharp, just bitter enough to sting, like the truth when you finally stop lying to yourself. The cup rests on an old, curled newspaper on my dashboard. The paper's from last November, a habit I picked up when Becky and I still used to do the crossword together. Now I read alone. Becky, my wife. She's 47. Accountant. Works remote now. We've been married 16 years. When we met, she worked the front desk at a dental clinic I insured. She had this distracted look, always half focused on a spreadsheet, until she laughed. That laugh once cracked open a room like sunlight through blinds. Now it clicks along in another room, on another call, aimed at someone else. It's still musical, but it's not mine anymore. She used to drink peppermint tea. Now it's Merlot on weeknights and late walks. To get some air. She started dressing lighter. Scarves I didn't buy. New perfume, sharp, citrusy, not her usual soft lavender. A blue thermos with the San Francisco Giants logo appeared on the counter. I asked about it. She said, "Oh, a guy from accounting sent it." She doesn't follow baseball. Never did. Then I noticed the Wi-Fi password had changed. Our shared iPad no longer synced. I opened the router's admin panel out of habit. In the logs, I saw a MAC address that didn't match anything we owned. Connected at odd hours, 2:11 a.m. for 48 a.m. I didn't mention it. Just logged the timestamps. We used to run together down Bayshore Boulevard on Sunday mornings, laughing and dodging the early cyclists. She wore that faded navy sweatshirt I still keep in my closet, the one that smells like eucalyptus and detergent. Sometimes I open that drawer and just sit there. Let the scent hit me. Friday, June 7th. I was listening to Coltrane on vinyl, part of a first pressing collection I'd been building since college, when a message popped up from Joe, a friend from work. "Mark. Just saw Becky at Bluestone. She's with some guy. And buddy, it's definitely not you." I checked the time, 10:14 p.m. 79 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity, 68%. I stared at the numbers until they burned into my eyes. Then I picked up my notebook. Wrote it all down. My chest went cold. Not panic, just stillness. I didn't rush upstairs. I didn't confront her. I didn't even finish my bourbon. I walked outside, into the thick Florida air. My neighbor's wind chimes rang as a storm crept in from the Gulf. I drove to the 24-hour drugstore and bought a cheap notebook, a prepaid SIM card, and a burner phone. Then I stopped at the hardware store off Kennedy Boulevard and picked up a discreet GPS tracker the size of a lighter. Magnetic base, waterproof casing. Tracks in real time through an app. I watched a tutorial in the car before I even pulled away. At 1:03 a.m., I stood in the garage, holding the thermos she never used, the one from the accountant. I placed the tracker under the rear bumper of her Hyundai. The magnets clicked softly. I tested the signal twice. Worked perfectly. Back inside, I opened a new email under a pseudonym. I didn't know what I'd do yet. But I knew this much: trust was a luxury I could no longer afford. That night, it wasn't just my eyes watching anymore. Becky had no idea she'd stepped into a game where I dictated the rules. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. Old habit from years of early commutes. The house was silent, save for the rhythmic click of the ceiling fan above our bed. Becky was still asleep, curled away from me like a comma in the sentence we no longer finished. I made coffee, slower than usual, and checked the tracker's app. Her car hadn't moved. I stared at the screen longer than I needed to. Not because I expected anything, but because I wanted to get used to the feeling of watching. To separate reaction from strategy. By 9:15 a.m., she came downstairs in leggings and that old gray hoodie I bought her on our 5th anniversary. She poured herself a glass of water, glanced at me once, then said, "Heading to yoga." I answered, "Have a good one." By 9:32 a.m., the Hyundai was moving. A soft vibration pulsed in my pocket, the tracker's notification, like a second heartbeat. She didn't go west, toward her usual gym. Instead, she turned east and headed across the bridge. The app showed her parking near an apartment complex off Henderson. I zoomed in. The complex had no fitness center. No nearby cafes. Nothing that made sense at 9:43 on a Saturday. I drove by once. Rolled past slow. Heard the low hum of wall-mounted air units, the screech of rusted iron gates swinging open. A cat darted under a stairwell. The parking lot smelled of damp concrete and overripe citrus from a tree nearby. She stayed there for 2 hours and 13 minutes. When she returned, I was back in the garage, cleaning the workbench I hadn't touched in months. She walked past me, said nothing. I asked, "How was yoga?" She said, "Good. You should come sometime." I smiled into the screwdriver drawer. That week I tracked everything. Monday, 8:12 p.m., parked again at the same complex. Wednesday, 7:50 p.m., different address, near the marina. Friday, 10:05 p.m., back to Bluestone. I took notes. Mileage. Duration. Weather. Her outfit. The temperature of the steering wheel when I sat in her car that one time. The lingering scent of cologne that wasn't mine. Each night, I'd open the window slightly and let the air settle in the room before she returned, warm, damp, full of palm pollen and distance. Lunch became optional. I'd walk past the break room, smell my leftover pasta still sealed in Tupperware. Never heated it. Just let it sit there, untouched. Even Zoom meetings at work felt like watching surveillance footage, every face pixelated by my own withdrawal. I didn't ask her anything. Instead, I called an old contact from high school, a private investigator named Rachel Long. She ran a small firm out of Clearwater, and owed me a favor from back in '98 when I helped her brother settle a claim. We met at a diner off I-275. Rachel stirred her coffee, black, no cream. She said, "You always did have a nose for trouble. So, what am I looking for?" I gave her the addresses, timelines, Becky's license plate. Then I slid over 2 photos, Becky at our wedding, and Becky at the last company holiday party, laughing too brightly at a joke I hadn't heard. Rachel flipped through the notebook. She said, "No yoga studios near Henderson. That place? Not fitness, it's cover." Then she smirked at one of my notes. "Who the hell logs steering wheel temp? You're more thorough than half my trainees." I said, "I need to know. All of it." She nodded. "You'll have it. And if she's sloppy, we'll know fast." Her office smelled of budget plastic and ink. Behind her, a faded license certificate hung slightly crooked beside a calendar with missed appointment stickers. By Thursday, I had photos. Becky with a man, mid-50s, tan, salt and pepper beard, standing close outside a condo entrance. She was smiling. He touched her waist. Her expression wasn't nervous. It was familiar. Practiced. That night, I sat in my car outside the house. Coltrane on the radio again. The leather seats were still warm from the day. My coffee had gone stale in the cup holder, bitter and flat. The air smelled of damp leather and the citrus sour of an old tree outside the garage. The clock on the dash ticked faintly, a cheap old Timex I'd glued there years ago. I looked at Becky's face in the photo again. My pulse didn't flinch. Not once. But my fingers were cold, stiff from clenching the wheel too long. I thought about our first apartment, The tiny kitchen with cracked linoleum, the way she'd laugh at my attempts to brew strong coffee. How she called it. Mark's motor oil. I thought of that night we danced barefoot to a record skipping every sixth beat, and didn't care. And now? I'd already spoken to a lawyer. Just a consult. The voice on the other end was calm, practiced. He said, "Mark, if you're asking about temporary custody, I can draw the papers tonight. But you need to be sure." I said, "I am." I also enabled VPN monitoring on our home router. I could view webcam logs remotely. I hadn't looked yet. But I knew that red LED on the side of the router had blinked twice last night. It always did when the internal camera kicked in. For 1 second, I imagined walking away. Just packing the car and driving into dusk. For that moment, my heart cracked. Then the thought chilled. Hardened. I realized something sitting there. She wasn't my wife anymore. And I wasn't the same man. I wasn't just watching now. I was mapping. Predicting. Calculating. Every step she made, I'd already anticipated. The game was mine to command. 3 days after Rachel handed me the first batch of photos, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I shaved. Not because I wanted to look good, but because I needed to feel like I hadn't disappeared. The mirror fogged slightly as warm steam coiled upward. Beneath the condensation, my reflection looked pale, indecisive. I leaned closer. The stubble was thick and disorganized, like time had collected without asking. The first swipe of the razor dragged cold steel along my jaw. My skin flinched. The lather smelled faintly of pine and old soap, a scent I hadn't noticed in years. The faucet dripped slow, rhythmic, each drop echoing off the sink. And then the flashback, my father, tall and composed, in this same mirror 30 years ago. He said nothing, just moved the blade with clinical calm. That day, he had an interview with a steel company in Bradenton. I was 12, mimicking his every motion with a plastic razor, desperate to feel like someone who had a future. At 6:48 a.m., I brewed my coffee. The grinder hummed low, masking the chirps of birds outside. I poured into a recycled paper cup and slipped it into the holder beside the passenger seat. A single drop escaped, landing on the edge of the manila envelope from Rachel. It bled into the cardboard, a warm circle that pulsed in time with my pulse. The envelope was worn, the top corner bent. Inside, the GPS logs were paper-clipped and color-coded. One photo had a sticky note. "Same car, 3rd week, same lot." Rachel's handwriting, brisk and tidy. Another photo stood out, Becky laughing, her head tilted back, a key fob dangling from her fingers. But it wasn't for her car. The brand logo was different. Something imported. Something expensive. My fingers tensed. Not from pain. From control. The name Alex W. Hennigan meant little at first. But property records and an old LinkedIn page confirmed, ex-CFO, remarried once, now single again. When I saw his face next to Becky's Hyundai in that photo, that changed things. She came home early that day. Said, "Internet's down. Can you check the router?" I said, "Sure." The router's surface was warm, LED blinking slow. I tapped into the back end. VPN logins, guest access, 2 distinct MAC addresses unregistered to our network, one flagged for 48 a.m., 3 nights ago. Consistent. That evening, she made pasta. Garlic heavy, creamy. I took a single bite. It felt like chewing something from a life that no longer belonged to me. We watched a show. Her laughter came easily. Too easily. My notebook lay in my lap, under a throw blanket. I drew small arrows, timelines, potential exits, bank route checks. Tuesday morning, I told her I had an inspection downtown. I parked 3 blocks from Hennigan's office. At 9:07 a.m., her Hyundai slid into the lot. She wore beige slacks and her light scarf, the one she never wore for me. She walked with confidence. Owned the space. Back in the outback, I sipped cold coffee and reread Rachel's margin notes. Confidence equals comfort equals repetition. The footage from our garage had a different energy that night. At 11:14 p.m., she came down barefoot, hoodie loose around her shoulders. She hesitated at the trunk. Opened it. Reached inside, then stopped. No object removed. Just stillness. And then she closed it. Slowly. She knew. Not everything. But enough. At the diner, Rachel greeted me with a weary smile. The space smelled of burnt toast and vinyl. Plastic menus clacked when we set them down. She said, "Proof's only good if it's undeniable." I answered, "I want audio. I want her voice choosing." She handed me a recorder. Smaller than a coin. "Your hands don't shake, that's a good start. Slip it into her purse or coat." That night, Becky was scrolling recipes in the kitchen. I asked, "Seen my flash drive?" She said, "Check the tote by the door." The fabric gave way just enough. The recorder nestled beside a folded receipt and a pen with a corporate logo I didn't recognize. My hand stilled. For a heartbeat, my chest tightened. What if she found it? What if she didn't? In that pause, my own heartbeat sounded like a warning I could no longer ignore. The first playback was static. Then background noise. Then, Friday. Same room. His voice. Then hers. "He's drifting. I think he knows." The words should have broken something. They didn't. They solidified. That night, I emailed my attorney again. The reply was swift. He wrote, "Petition filed. Hearing in 9 business days. I'll handle disclosures. You stay quiet." His words cut as cleanly as that first blade swipe. No hesitation, no mercy. I stared at the bank records. Transfers. Hidden funds. Labeled. Consulting reimbursement. At 2:43 a.m., I returned to the garage. I removed the tracker. Wiped the bumper. I opened the passenger door, left a folded paper. It said, "The man you think you're playing already left the table. The pieces? Reassigned." She thought she was moving pawns. But I was already playing on a board she'd never even spotted. The morning after I pulled the tracker, I stood outside our local branch of First Atlantic. A clean red brick building with fake columns and a polite receptionist who knew my name. The marble tile inside reflected my shoes like a mirror, 2 black, steady silhouettes. A faint draft brushed my neck as I handed over the paperwork. The door hadn't fully latched. I walked straight to the second-floor office and shook hands with Linda Harrington, a banking officer who once helped us refinance the house. She said, "Mark, haven't seen you in a while." I answered, "Just some updates to our accounts. Routine." But it wasn't. I had a printout in my briefcase. 5 transfers from our joint account to a newly opened card under Becky's name. I traced the amounts through transaction timestamps, matching each to a login session flagged in the router logs. She was funneling money, slow and quiet, like someone preparing a soft landing. Linda adjusted her glasses and glanced over the forms I slid across. Her printer clattered to life, and with a firm stamp, click, she sealed the freeze. That sound echoed louder than it should have. She said, "You sure you want to place a freeze?" I said, "I'm sure." The office smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and recycled air. Even the marble felt colder than I remembered. Maybe everything did. By noon, I was parked behind the county courthouse. The file folder on my passenger seat contained scanned messages, call records, and a flash drive with audio, all time-stamped and labeled. My lawyer, Eric Sandoval, leaned on the hood of his black Audi and took the folder without a word. He said, "Custody terms?" I answered, "No kids. Just one asset I want protected. The house." He nodded, flipping through the papers. He said, "You've got a case. And leverage." We agreed on tone, no drama, no escalation, just precision. Eric was ex-Air Force. He understood structure. That evening, Becky came home earlier than expected. The kitchen lights were off. I sat at the dining table, a single lamp on. The silence was deliberate. She said. Why so dark in here? I said. Just thinking. She paused. Her keys didn't go in the bowl like usual. She kept them in her hand. She said, You okay? I said, I will be. She looked at me then, like someone peering through a foggy window, not sure what they're seeing. The next morning, she didn't ask for her usual peppermint tea. She left without saying goodbye. Her scarf was the same, but her posture had changed, tighter, aware. I logged the detail in my notebook. Friday, June 14th, behavioral shift. That weekend, I did something unusual. I stayed home. No surveillance runs. No tech. Just silence. I walked into our garage and turned off the main breaker. Watched the clock reset on the microwave. Removed the batteries from our Nest cams. Then I sat in the living room and listened, to nothing, to everything. And in that quiet, I began sorting through every artifact of our life together. The concert stubs in a drawer. The birthday cards. A postcard with a lighthouse on it, one we bought on our anniversary trip to Bar Harbor. I slid it into an envelope alongside the court order. The living room smelled like cedar polish and old books. The couch where we used to watch movies now held only the imprint of one body. That night I dreamed of our first apartment, cramped, bright, cheap. She laughed then, sitting cross-legged on the floor, holding a spoonful of peanut butter, daring me to take it. In the dream, I reached for it, but she pulled away, and I saw her hand in someone else's. I woke up at 3:17 a.m., sweat damp and cold. And I knew. She was pulling away not just physically, but historically. Erasing our shared past, frame by frame. On Monday, Eric sent me the court date. He wrote, Set for July 1st. Early filing granted. Prepare disclosure folders. I opened the envelope and placed it on the kitchen counter. Right where she'd see it. Nothing dramatic. Just a single sheet, face up, court seal visible. That night she didn't come home. I had finally spoken, not with words, but with silence and signatures. And now, every unanswered ring of the phone said it louder, the reckoning had begun. Stillness isn't silence. It's pressure, concentrated in the back of the eyes, at the base of the neck, between the ribs where the breath turns sharp. That week, I moved through days like a machine. Shower at 6:02, coffee at 6:18. I went to work, still showed up, still filed claims, still nodded in meetings. But every screen I looked at, every voice I heard, faded beneath one relentless background process: prepare. I tracked no new pings from the GPS. Her routes stayed consistent. Work. Yoga. Grocery. Once, a visit to a FedEx on 9th, 2 towns over, I marked the timestamp. Nothing illegal. But everything meaningful. Rachel texted me midweek. Got audio. One clip you'll want to hear. I drove to the diner, same booth, same window. She slid the flash drive across the table beside my untouched coffee. I plugged it into my laptop. Played it once. Then again. Then a third time, slower. Becky's voice. She said, We'll wait until after the 1st. I need him calm. Another voice, male. Confident. Not laughing. He said, He doesn't suspect? She answered, He suspects something. But not enough. He's still predictable. I didn't react. Rachel watched me. She said, You okay? I said, Yeah. But inside, I felt the floor shift. Not panic, not even rage. Just a recalibration. My heartbeat sounded like a warning I could no longer ignore. That evening, I opened the drawer where I'd stored our old insurance papers. Behind them, tucked flat against the wood, was a photo strip from a boardwalk in 2012, the two of us laughing, sunglasses askew, the ocean behind us. She was wearing a hoodie that no longer hung in our closet. I folded the strip once, then twice, and slid it behind a file labeled Q3 Disputes. As I passed through the hallway, the scent of my own cologne, Old Spice, classic, hung faint in the air, mixing with the waxy citrus cleaner she'd used that morning. For a second, It felt like we were still sharing this space. Then the silence reminded me, we weren't. Friday night, I sat in the outback in the parking lot near her yoga studio. It was raining, soft, inconsistent. The kind of rain that leaves the air heavier, not cleaner. I watched as she exited with two others. Smiled, waved, walked alone to her car. No umbrella. I didn't follow. Instead, I drove to the beach. Walked the edge of the sand, letting my shoes soak. Listened to the waves and the distant drone of a barge's horn. In my pocket, the burner phone buzzed with a new ping. Her Hyundai, parked again outside that FedEx. Same pattern. I didn't call her. But that night, I sat in the kitchen with the envelope, the one from court, opened it, and added a page. Handwritten. One paragraph, nothing aggressive. Just a statement of my position. My terms. And I signed it with my name in the same tight script I once used to label my thermoses, clear, controlled, mine. The next morning, she stood by the sink, holding that lighthouse postcard. She said, "You kept this?" I said, "Some things don't get thrown out." She turned it over, read the date. August 14th, Bar Harbor. She said, "I remember that trip." I said, "I remember who we were then." She didn't speak for a while. Then, quietly, she said, "Do we have to do this like this?" I looked at her steady. I said, "There's no other way left." She reached for the envelope, her fingers trembling. It wasn't fear. It was something slower, recognition. Later that day, I packed a small bag. Not for escape. For clarity. Inside, 5 days of clothes, my old Montblanc pen, a leather-bound notebook, a backup flash drive, the spare garage key. It wasn't a getaway kit. It was a contract kit. A future I could carry. When she passed the hallway and saw it by the door, her breath caught. Her eyes dropped to the canvas straps. She said nothing, but her shoulders squared like someone bracing against cold wind. And I knew she saw it. She thought I was still playing her game. But I'd already changed the board, rewritten the rules, and chosen the moment. This was no longer negotiation. It was declaration. Some betrayals are shouted down in courtrooms. Others unfold in dry rooms filled with quiet clicks and legal pads. Mine began with a door creaking shut behind me at precisely 9:02 a.m. on a Monday. The clerk at the Hillsborough County Courthouse barely looked up. Fluorescent lights buzzed like nervous energy overhead. I slid my folder across the counter. Its stamp read case #2025FC1178. Inside, GPS logs, audio transcripts, bank records, and Rachel's final interview notes. Each page heavier than its weight in truth. He said, "Mr. Davis?" I nodded. "Here to file the petition." He tapped the scanner. The metal detectors clicked. I stepped aside, shoulders straight, tie undisturbed. In the attorney conference room, I met Eric Sandoval, my lawyer. His black Audi keys lay on the table as a silent testament to his efficiency. He said, "Judges move fast on temp orders when it's this airtight." I handed over the packet. "I want the house, the accounts, freeze everything until trial." He flipped through the tabs: property deed, joint account statements, the FedEx timestamp tied to that Friday pattern. "Got it." Outside, I paused beneath a palm by the courthouse fountain. The air smelled of chlorine and tropical mulch. A bus roared past, and my reflection rippled in its glass. Tie straight, chin level. For the first time in weeks, I looked like someone with nothing left to hide. 11:47 a.m., First Atlantic Bank. A clean red brick building with fake columns greeted me. Inside, marble tiles reflected my polished shoes. I took the elevator to the second floor and entered Linda Harrington's office. She'd helped us refinance years ago. She said, "Mark. You. I wasn't expecting you." I placed the bank printouts on her desk, 5 transfers from our joint account to a new card under Becky's name. I said, "I'll need an immediate freeze on these funds." Her fingers paused over the keyboard, empathy in that tiny hesitation. Then, she said, "Consider it done." Each click of her mouse sounded like a judge's gavel. I thanked her and left, the envelope of stamped forms lighter in my briefcase. 2 p.m., County Courthouse, Room 3B. Eric and I took seats at the front. The gallery was sparse, mostly attorneys and one curious reporter. Becky sat in the back row, the gray hoodie slipping off her shoulder, clutching her own folder. Judge Alden entered, robes cascading. She glanced at our case number, then at Eric's exhibits. Judge Alden said, "Mr. Davis, you request exclusive occupancy and an asset freeze?" I said, "Yes, Your Honor. I've supplied evidence of unauthorized transfers and transactions designed to strip marital assets." Becky stood, voice tight. She said, "Your Honor, Mark's freezing me out. I need access for living expenses." Judge Alden looked to Eric, then back to Becky. She said, "Mr. Davis proposes a monthly stipend. Mrs. Davis, does that cover your needs?" Becky's eyes flickered over the stipend sheet. She said, "It's sufficient." Judge Alden said, "Order granted. Temporary orders are in effect until the next hearing. Court is adjourned." Gavel. A low exhale caught in my chest. 4:15 p.m., outside the courthouse. Rain began in soft sheets, washing the steps. Eric handed me a Starbucks cup, black, no sugar. He said, "First move complete. Residence and funds secure." I said, "And I'm still here." 7:30 p.m., our empty house. I returned to find the lights off. The front door was locked. Inside, I set the briefcase on the console table, then walked room to room, kitchen, living room, bedroom. The silence was absolute. I boiled water for chamomile tea, the kettle's whistle breaking the hush. I sat at the dining table under a single lamp, opened my leather-bound notebook to a fresh page dated June 30th, and wrote in tight script, "Tomorrow at noon, final move. Checkmate." Outside, thunder rumbled, a grave reminder that storms follow stillness. For the first time, she'd lost the initiative. I stood unmoved, no anger, no triumph, only resolve. The silence was no longer my shield, it was the verdict. I arrived at the courthouse 10 minutes before the noon hearing. The sky was slate gray, a low ceiling of clouds promising rain. I walked the familiar path up the marble steps, briefcase in hand, shoes tapping in precise rhythm. Each step echoed like a drumbeat, a metronome guiding my final move. Inside, the hallway was hushed. Only the click of heels and the rustle of paper cut through the air. I paused at the door of room 3B, took a steadying breath, and entered as the bailiff announced my case. Becky sat to my left, face pale and composed. Her gray hoodie had been replaced. She wore a navy blouse today, one I once gifted her for our 10th anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me. Judge Alden presided again, her robe's crisp, expression unreadable. The gallery was fuller this time, a handful of reporters, a family waiting on another matter, and one empty seat, reserved for what would come next. I placed my briefcase on the table and opened it, revealing 3 stacks of documents. Final asset declarations, updated brokerage statements, the new bank records from the out-of-state account, cross-reference to router logs and payment timestamps. Contract kit evidence, photos of the bag by the door, the lighthouse postcard, the notebook with "Final Move" penciled on June 30th. Audio transcript, Becky's own words captured on the coin-sized recorder, each line timestamped, each lie highlighted. Judge Alden said, "Mr. Davis, your supplemental exhibits are on file. Mrs. Davis, do you contest any of these?" Becky rose, voice steady but soft. She said, "Your Honor, I admit I spoke to Alex. But I never intended to hide assets. I thought this was our private agreement." Her words hung in the air like smoke. The reporters scribbled. The judge waited. I said, "Your Honor, my petition is for final equitable distribution and confirmation of exclusive residency. Mrs. Davis's actions, funneling $72,000 through a fake nonprofit, arranging secret meetings, constitute a breach of fiduciary duty. I request the court award me sole title to the residence and full recovery of misappropriated funds." Judge Alden lifted her gaze to the courtroom clock. 12:17 p.m. She said, "I have reviewed the evidence. The audio confirms premeditation. The financial records prove intent. Mr. Davis, your request is granted in full. Mrs. Davis, you are to vacate the property within 10 days. The funds in question will be returned to Mr. Davis's account, and any future disputes will be heard in chambers." The gavel came down with finality. My chest felt strangely light, as if I'd exhaled the weight of months. 2:40 p.m., outside the courthouse. The rain began then, steady, warming the air. I stood under the portico, watching Becky emerge. She clutched her folder, shoulders trembling. Our eyes met briefly, her face an open question, mine a mirror of resolute calm. I didn't offer a word. She didn't ask for one. I stepped into the drizzle and pulled my collar up. Rain rolled down my suit sleeves like tears, only colder. Across the street, a bus pulled in, its headlights cutting through the gray. I watched it pass, thought of the boardwalk photos, the lighthouse postcard, the contract bag by the door. 6:30 p.m., our house. The front door stood unlocked. Inside, boxes lined the hallway, Becky's belongings packed in beige moving cartons. I traced my fingers along the banister, gathering the last of our shared history, the concert stub from Bar Harbor, the coffee mug labeled "Property of Mark," the photo of us on the boardwalk. I stacked them neatly on the dining table. My phone buzzed, a text from Becky. She said, "I'm sorry." I stared at the screen. No reply came. I walked to my office, opened the drawer where I'd hidden the final page of our life together, the divorce decree, signed by both of us, effective August 1st. I laid it flat on my desk, then picked up my Mont Blanc and signed in the corner one last time. Midnight, the final watch. I sat alone in the living room, lights low, the house silent. I poured a glass of bourbon, neat, and raised it to the empty chair next to me. In my pocket, the burner phone lay dormant. No pings, no new patterns, no more secrets left to unearth. I thought of the journey, the first note slipped under the door, the tracker magnets clicking under her car, the GPS pings in the FedEx lot, the audio in that diner booth, the banking freeze, the court petitions. Each move a step on a chessboard I designed, every piece aligned to lead here. I took a sip. The burn was welcome, a reminder I was still alive. She believed she held the cards. But I rewrote the game, moved the queen, and claimed my victory, all without shouting a single word. Subscribe if you want more stories like this, about real men who don't shout. They act. Coldly. Until the end. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from. Channel, Cheating Tales Real Stories.